Hold on, I have to get the title sequence right. Sibbity ha da beep ba da da beep ba boop ba ba ra da 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 blah 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 or is it beep ba boop beep 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 beep. I don't know if you can see this here. This is my to read stack of single issues and some trades. I don't know if you can see this up here. These are all the books I have yet to read. Most of them are bookie books, but a lot of them are funny books as well. Yeah, it's a little peek into my life. Yeah, you didn't enjoy it? Imagine living it. No, but I have these 8 short boxes worth of comics that I still have to read, and I put them all in order, and then I've been trying to get my room cleaned up a little bit. I've lived here for a year, and it looks like I moved in yesterday. Anyway, how have you been? I don't care. Alright, first up. It's all indies this week. On Wednesday, I'm in love with your host, Jimmy Calloway. First up, from the good people at Aftershock Comics, There's Something Wrong with Patrick Todd, number 1. I was not originally going to get this, but it is written by Ed Brisson, and the first page is really good. I don't want to ruin it. So, I don't really know much about it. I read the solicit and previews, and I was like, because I just don't need another new title. Like, I think I've evened out. Like, I've leveled off. So I'm not getting, like, an insane amount. But I'm definitely getting more than I was before I worked there. Which, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I get about 25% more comics than I was. And I also get 25% off as an employee. So it all comes out in the wash. You see what I'm saying? Also this week, Mind Management: Bootleg from the good people at the Darky Horse, right? Actually, I believe this is, because this is Matt Kent's book, yeah. So this is published by Dark Horse, but Matt Kent has a new imprint at Dark Horse called Flux House, and I'm not sure what all that entails. I'm assuming more books from Matt Kent in that same vibe. Mind Management was a series that he began, I want to say, in 2013. That sounds right. And it was great fun. Matt Kent, and I don't remember. No, this was my pick for the shop, so I have been. I didn't give you the screed. I wrote it into the email that we send out that I can't even sign up for because our website's goofy. Galaxy of Comics, Louise and Satakoy in beautiful Van Nuys, California. Matt Kent cut his teeth in the industry doing spy books. Two Sisters, Yellow Peril, Super Spy was the first thing I read, which I believe was originally a web comic that was then collected into a book. And they're great. They're very Wes Anderson-y, which I don't mean derogatorily. I even if you're a fan of Wes Anderson, the notion of something being Wes Anderson-y might not be super fun to you, but the reason I say that is because not only do they have a kind of generally, I mean, all the issues of Mind Management previous, I believe, were in colored pencil. I know Kent went through a big phase where he was using colored pencil a lot, and it looked great. But yeah, his art has always been, it is reminiscent of children's books from like the 50s or 60s, and the spying that goes on in these books, it's not like your dad's Tom Clancy novels. It's not even like James Bond or any of that kind of bullshit. It's more stories about people who are kind of caught in a war, because I think like Super Spy was all during World War II. It's more like Cavalier and Clay, which I think I've also mentioned recently. Like, it has that kind of a vibe to it. This series apparently is not going to be drawn by Matt Kent, even though it's written by him. It's going to be drawn by Farrell Dalrymple, who's a great artist who I haven't seen around since Pop Gun War. Gosh, that couldn't be it. Farrell Dalrymple's another sort of indie darling, and I'm probably mispronouncing his name. Also, apparently plays D&D with my friend Jad. Who knew? So many brushes with celebrity that I have. Well, we're in the industry. the shithead industry. Farrell Dalrymple first came to my attention because he drew Jonathan Lethem's Omega the Unknown. I want to say there was something right before that, but I can't remember. But Dalrymple's got a very, what I would call, complementary style to Matt Kintz. They don't draw the same at all, but they definitely have a very similar vibe. So this will be great fun. I don't know if they're gonna, like, the original series had all kinds of fun, like, codes you could try to break and, like, puzzles. Like, in the inside back cover, there would always be, like, a fakey letters page or, like, an editorial page, and there'd be, like, code embedded in it you'd have to try to figure out. To be honest with you, I stopped trying to play the game after the first few issues because I just like to read and then move on to the next comic. But that's on me. So how you like them apples? Also this week, oh, there we go, is Absolution #1. This is from AWA, Artists, Writers, and Artisans, if I'm not mistaken. Very silly title, name of a publishing company. This is actually the variant cover drawn by Frank Cho, which I liked a little bit better. The A cover was a Blade Runner homage, and I love Electric Sheep, but Blade Runner doesn't do much for me. I picked this up also largely because it's by Peter Milligan, written by Peter Milligan, and drawn by Mike Deodato, who is like the house artist over at AWA, which is just fine. Frank Cho, I've never been a super duper fan of his work, but I do enjoy it quite a bit. I don't know what this is about. There was another book in the late aughts called Absolution, which was on Avatar Press and was written by Christos Gage, and I would recommend that also because it's basically it's about a superhero who's also a serial killer. It's very Dexter, even though I never saw Dexter, and it was really, really, really good. Christos Gage back then was writing a ton of comics. He doesn't do much anymore. He's writing currently. This has nothing to do with anything, but Christos Gage is currently writing the Marvel Fortnite book, which I give a shit about. I think he's probably doing more work in video games and animation, which is where, to my understanding, a lot of comic book creators kind of drift into from comics because comics pay for shit and they treat you like shit. It's just like working at McDonald's, except that you get a bunch of free comics, I would imagine. This is one of the main reasons I've never pursued any kind of work in the comic book industry. The retail side of it's a different story. And that, I mean, I was already... I had already worked retail a ton in my 20s, so it wasn't like I was being disillusioned by getting a retail job. Plus, I made it clear to my boss when I started that I did not want to be behind the counter unless it was absolutely necessary. And so far, he's been pretty good about it. Oh. You gotta fire that intern. All right. Last week, I'm very tired. And I also hate everything. Last week I read the variants #1. This was great stuff. Not a whole lot has happened yet, though. It's really just kind of setting up. And when you have on the cover the premise of the book, it's a bunch of different Jessica Joneses across the multiverse. The reveal at the end is fun, but it's like, yeah, obviously that was going to be the case. Like, Jessica Jones knows less about this first issue than we do. What I did really notice, and what I think is just another feather in the cap for Gail Simone, is at least twice while reading it, in my brain was just like, oh, this is Bendis. This is some good stuff by Bendis. This isn't Bendis. This is Gail Simone. And that's not to say that she's writing like Bendis, but she's writing Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones was Bendis' creation, and perhaps his first for Marvel. And she's obviously become a long-lasting staple of the Marvel Universe. You know, she got a TV show before most of the other characters or whatever. So, yeah, Gail Simone just nails it. Like, she writes the character. She knows the character as well or better than as well as or better than the creator, which is not. That's very difficult. I mean, you can't just walk in off the street and do that, or I wouldn't think anyway. Looking forward to the rest of that series for sure. I also read Iron Man and Hellcat Annual. This was great fun too. This is mostly focused on Patsy, which is just fine by me. I've always felt like Patsy Walker gets a bit of a short shrift, although she's definitely been in more comics in the last 10 years than she has in the previous 40. She started as like in the 50s, I want to say, maybe early 60s, Patsy Walker. Just, I don't think she had, but she was in like Marvel's sort of Archie line. They had Millie the Model, they had Patsy Walker. I can't remember what the title of her book was. Eventually, they all got into one title called Showgirls, which was drawn by Dan DeCarlo, who was mostly an Archie guy. But it was a very high school, like she had, she had a rival popular girl, and she had a crush on boy, and this and that and the other thing. And then, I think it was in the 70s, they brought her back into the Marvel Universe. Because this was at a time, I'm probably getting my dates wrong, but this was at a time when the Marvel Universe was really congealing, and the notion that it was a shared universe, which DC at the time did not really, I mean, they do now, very much so, because of Marvel. But at the time, Marvel was like the only game in town as far as having a shared universe. And so they were like, hell, we're going to start bringing back characters from before, when we were Atlas or Timely or whatever. And so Patsy Walker was one of those. But they brought her back as a superhero because that's what Marvel published. They didn't publish anything but superhero comics around this time. And I think originally as Hellcat, she was like demonic. Like she was possessed or something. I don't remember. But they've made it canon that her teen adventures were all fictional, that her mother had drawn this comic starring her but without her blessing, but made a good, so everybody knows Patsy Walker from this comic book in the Marvel Universe. But then she was on the Defenders for a long time, which is largely how I know her. And then over the years, I want to say like the late aughts, the Immonens had a book. Catherine Stewart Immonen wrote and drew her title. Maybe that was like the early teens, like 2012 in there somewhere. And then there was a book in like 2016 called Patsy Walker Hellcat. Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat, which I want to say was Rainbow Rowell or Thompson. What's the other one? The one that writes Black Widow that hasn't come out in forever. Kelly Thompson. One of those writers, I believe. And I think maybe even Mariko Tamaki did an issue in there. Or two. But it was really good. And both those titles, whenever Patsy shows up now, it always plays up the notion that she was kind of a silly, flighty character that then became a superhero that is now kind of caught between two worlds all the time. And it's really great. So in this issue, she goes to hell, and she fights Blackheart, and her ex-husband, both her ex-husbands show up in this. Buzz something or other from the original run, and then she was married to Damon Hellstrom, the son of Satan, and he pops up. Unfortunately, not in his normal form, and I mean that in two ways. I don't want to give away the plot twist in the book, but he also shows up sort of in flashback, and it's in his, I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but there was a book a couple years ago called Strike Force, I believe, that I really dug, that I want to say was Saladin Ahmed, which is weird. I've been thinking about this too, because Saladin Ahmed writes Ms. Marvel and he writes Miles Morales Spider-Man, which are two very big books over at Marvel, and I don't like them. But he did books like Black Bolt, and I want to say also Strike Force. Smaller books that didn't even go a year, but they were way better. They were super good. I don't care for his current mainstream work, which I don't like to disparage. But, why did I get into that? Oh, right. So, the Son of Satan has long been one of my favorite characters, obviously. And for whatever reason, during Strike Force, they shaved his head, and then his ears are way pointier, which they never were quite that pointy before. But I don't know why they went with a bald look for him, but I remember I wrote a letter which they didn't publish, but I said, "Hey, could you make it? Can you give the Son of Satan his old costume back? Because he looks like the Travelocity gnome gone wrong or something very clever like that." And apparently, they're not taking that suggestion to heart. So I honestly, Son of Satan hasn't been in a book since then, and I would honestly they don't put him in one. I feel like they're going to give Hellcat her own book here eventually. I mean, she has been featured heavily in Iron Man recently, but once Cantwell leaves, Christopher Cantwell's been writing that book for the last year or so. Maybe Patsy will go with it. I don't know. But, yeah, it was good. I also read Public Domain #1 by Mr. Chip Zdarsky. I think I got the plot synopsis wrong when I was talking about it last week, but I was in the right neighborhood. It's a story about a very, very popular superhero character created by two guys, and is a huge character now. He's like in movies and stuff, and one of the two guys, one guy who kind of like hogs all the credit is, you know, a real asshole, and then another guy who worked on the book, I can't remember if he's the writer or the artist, he's always kind of got the short shrift, and his kids, his grown children, are like embarrassed for him and kind of by him, and then the plot thickens at the end. I don't want to give it away. Very reminiscent of Bill Kane and Bob Finger, which I think is the main thing. Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Did I say it the other way around? Bob Kane and Bill Finger. For years and years and years, well into my adulthood, Bob Kane was always credited as the sole creator of Batman. Didn't matter because he didn't get more money for it, really. But he was really an asshole, apparently. I've never read a story about Bob Kane that made him look better for it. Bill Finger, though, eventually started getting co-creator credit, and now I would consider him to be the actual creator of Batman. If you want to give Bob Kane the design credit, that's pretty good too, but I don't know, maybe I'm siding with Bill Finger just because I have a tendency to root for the underdog. But yeah, I mean, he didn't get any credit, and I think like the character in the book, he didn't really feel he deserved it, or he wasn't. That's really one of the sad things. And I can't recommend Cavalier and Clay, but comic books as an art form have always had the lowest self-esteem of any art form, especially as far as pop culture goes. You know, people use the word rock star to you know, oh, that guy's a rock star, like it's cool, or being a movie star or a TV star. There's no such thing as a comic book star outside of the comic book industry, anyway, which is really what a star means. Like a movie star is an actor that people who don't even watch movies know who they are. Star, if you know, like Kirk Acevedo should be a star, but he's not. He's a character actor that I enjoy because he's in that 12 Monkeys show, and he popped up on NYPD Blue a few times. Mr. Acevedo, if you're out there, big fan. But comics have always suffered from this real low self-esteem, and the fact that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has taken over cinema is notwithstanding. It's still, that's how I'm getting myself mixed up. There was Evan Dorkin did a comic strip once that it was called something like "What if comic books were treated like everything else?" or "What if every other form of entertainment was treated like comic books?" And then there was like a guy going, "Did you know that Nicolas Cage listens to music?" Because Nicolas Cage is a comic book nerd, or he was. I think he sold his collection at some point. At which point, don't talk to me, Mr. H.I. McDonough. But that's the sort of thing that people in comic books, and I used to do it too, until I realized how stupid it sounded. when you're a comic book fan, you're almost always trying to rationalize that to your friends and family and to the public at large. And so you're always trying to, oh, but Nicolas Cage reads comics. Or, oh, they made this into a TV show. Oh, they made this into a movie. And it's like, they did? Who fucking cares, you pathetic turd? That's as far as fandom goes. But it goes back to the beginning of the Golden Age when these guys were treated like slave labor and they kind of internalized it. The smart guys like Neil Adams and Jack Kirby, they were like, no, we're worth way. I mean, Kirby never really got paid like he should have. But Adams was definitely like, no, we're going to make sure that Siegel and Schuster get credit for creating Superman. And that was really where the creators' rights thing started in earnest, was when the Superman movie came out. And Jerry Siegel, they got Mario Puzo to write the screenplay, and Jerry Siegel was like, I'm starving, and you're giving it to the Godfather guy? I created this goddamn character. And he sued and he won, which is good. But Neil Adams helped. So, but yeah, for years, though, those guys were just treated like the publishers were like, look, we're trying to sell X-ray specs. We don't give a shit about what's in here as long as these idiot children are buying it. So you have this character called Superman. Great, we'll give you $100 for it, and then you'll be lucky to get that. And they said, okay, you're right. And then they made $1 million gajillion like in the first year or two. And those guys were all, well, I guess it's not ours. It's ridiculous. So this is a book. If you're interested in that aspect of the comic book industry, that's the book for you. And then also this week, I read The Silver Surfer number 18. This is classic. It's in my hands. So The Silver Surfer was created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee for the Fantastic Four, for the Galactus trilogy. 49, 50, and 51. I believe those are the 3 issues where we're first introduced to the Silver Surfer. And then Kirby always considered it more his character, but then Stan got a hold of it. And that was one of the first kind of riffs between, not the first, but it was, when was this? Yeah, late 60s. They started a Silver Surfer monthly, but they gave the drawing duties to John Buscema, and Kirby was like, oh, did you guys lose my fucking phone number? And so that was like one. I remember, as the many things I've read about Kirby and Lee, especially, that was one of the last straws, is when they gave the Silver Surfer to John Buscema. But for whatever reason, they had him come in on this, the final issue of the Silver Surfer, and yeah, it's exactly like you would expect from a Jack Kirby book. It's inked by Herb Trimpe, which is better than being inked by Vince Colletta. I saw Tom Brevoort's newsletter. It's a very typical Kirby splash page. Typical in that it's a genius work of art. Vince Colletta used to ink Kirby, and he used to delete stuff all the time, and it's aggravating to even think about. But with Trimpe on inks, you're in the hands of a professional. And Trimpe was actually, I guess, supposed to take over as monthly artist after this issue, but this was the final issue. So in this issue also, sorry, I'm just losing my train of thought. They were going to take a new direction with the character, and so he'd been trapped on Earth ever since arriving and helping save Earth from Galactus. Galactus imprisoned him here on Earth, basically. He still had his board, but he couldn't leave the atmosphere. And it was very, with Lee and Buscema, and that was the other thing, is that Stan Lee would consider the character like his, and he asked that nobody else write the book. Eventually, in 1987, Steve Englehart started writing a new Silver Surfer book, and Stan was bummed out. And poor Stan. I read that there's he wrote a thing how he was so connected to the character, and he was really disappointed. He would have made time if he had known they were going to go ahead without him. And fuck you, Stan. I mean, I don't feel that bad for you. After this series, though, Kirby and Lee, like about 10 years later, did do a Silver Surfer story together, which was the first time since they had broken up, and I think the last time they ever worked together. Anyway, back to this. So he'd been trapped on Earth, and it was very, you know, a lot of the Silver Surfer, like, why are humans like this? I don't understand. Like, like that kind of very Christ-like in a way. This issue was going to take a new direction, though, and he has to fight the Inhumans, and he goes, you know what? You can all go to hell. Human, Inhuman, everybody on this planet is an asshole. And so we have one of the greatest splash pages ever drawn. This is the Silver Surfer declaring that he's going to now be the savage Silver Surfer. If I had to point to one page to, like, kind of, if somebody's like, what does Jack Kirby draw like? I would just show them this page. This is, to me, a perfect Kirby sketch, or a perfect Kirby drawing. And Shrimpy's inks I'm looking at now even are just so good. Like, he really just followed Kirby's lead, which is what anybody should have done. Coletta went fast because that's what he did. That's why they hired him. And so, but he would go so fast that he would just eliminate entire, like, backgrounds, and it's really aggravating when you see side by side what the book should have looked like. Look, I even have a Jack Kirby sticker on my notebook. Big fan. But that never happened. The Savage Silver Surfer never happened. In 1999, which was 30 years later, there was a book called Web Spinners: Tales of Spider-Man. And in issue number 4, they pick up from there and wrap up that storyline. But yeah, Surfer didn't have his own title again. He had his own, like, that Jack Kirby and Stan Lee one, and then there was one that John Byrne drew that Stan wrote, and then there was another 2-issue series that Stan wrote and Mobius drew. But he didn't have a monthly series again until 1987, which I have most of. I'm still working on that. I love the Silver Surfer, obviously, but I think the reason I always loved the Silver Surfer, I was thinking about this earlier, there's no other character like that in DC. Like, it was a lot of Marvel and DC. I mean, the layman can't tell them apart, nor should they. They're very, very similar. And if one character is popular, then the other company is going to have a similar character. But with the Silver Surfer, I don't think DC ever, I'm sure they tried, but they never have had one like that. And nor has anybody really. And it's perfectly indicative of what I love about superhero comics, in that it's very broad and far-reaching, and it's like a big swing. Like, this is a very highly powered character, and it's also, why is this silver guy on a surfboard? He's from Zen Law. They don't even have surfing there, to my knowledge. I mean, I haven't been there in a while. So poignant and yet supremely goofy. That is why I love Marvel Comics in particular, and superhero comics in general. Okay, good. I'm not going to try to make this last exactly 30 minutes. That would be stupid.